The heavy silence of the house pressed in on Max as he quietly turned the key in the side door lock just past 1 a.m. The click echoed unnaturally loud in the dead of night. He'd expected exhaustion after the flight back from New York. The unexpected last-minute seat, a small miracle after closing the deal that would change his life. Instead, adrenaline surged, icy and sharp, obliterating fatigue. It wasn't the long cab ride or the lingering gin and tonic causing the tremor in his hand. It was the gleaming, out-of-place gold Mercedes parked arrogantly in his driveway, nudged possessively close to the garage door on his side. He hadn't called Camilla. Third on the wait list, the odds had seemed slim. Now, standing in the narrow passage between the garage and the kitchen, the air thick with a stillness that felt wrong, he wished he hadn't made the flight. Every nerve ending screamed. He tried to conjure innocent explanations, a friend staying over, a forgotten arrangement. But his gut churned with a certainty that felt like swallowing acid. He slipped off his loafers, the expensive leather sighing softly on the cool tile of the utility room floor. Moving with a predatory quietness he didn't know he possessed, Max padded through the familiar darkness of the kitchen. Moonlight slanted through the window over the sink, catching the edge of the granite countertop, illuminating the path towards the main staircase. The house felt alien, violated. Each step on the plush runner of the stairs was deliberate, soundless. He held his breath, listening. Nothing but the rhythmic hum of the refrigerator downstairs, and a faint, almost imperceptible sound from upstairs, a low, guttural rumble, snoring, but not Camilla's usual soft, almost purring snore that he'd always found endearing, a sign of her deep, trusting sleep beside him. This was different, deeper, masculine. The door to their master bedroom was ajar, just a crack, leaking a sliver of dim light from the bedside lamp Camilla always left on. He paused, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The rage, a cold, coiling thing, began to unfurl in his belly, replacing the initial shock. He pushed the door open slowly, inch by agonizing inch. The scene hit him like a physical blow, sucking the air from his lungs. His vision tunneled. Camilla lay sprawled on her side of the king-sized bed, sheets tangled around her waist, her bare back exposed. One arm was flung possessively across the chest of a man sleeping soundly beside her. In their bed, the man was large, without clothes, a slight smug smile playing on his lips even in sleep. Max recognized him instantly from a charity gala months ago. Franklin Thompson, a slick car salesman known for his flashy suits and overly familiar charm. Camilla stirred slightly, nuzzling closer to the stranger, her soft snore now clearly audible, harmonizing obscenely with the man's deeper rumble. The sound, once a comfort, now felt like shards of glass grinding in Max's ears. The intimacy of it, the casual betrayal laid bare under the soft lamplight, shattered something irreparable within him. The love he'd nurtured for over 20 years, the foundation of his life, crumbled into dust in that single, horrific moment. His gaze drifted to the armchair near the window, the one he usually sat in. Neatly folded clothes lay draped over it. Expensive slacks, a silk shirt, boxer shorts. The man's shoes, polished loafers, sat primly beside the chair legs. Max noted the size difference. Thompson was easily 4 inches taller, 50 pounds heavier. The thought of grabbing the tennis racket from the closet flickered, a brief, satisfying image of violent retribution. But he dismissed it. Too messy, too impulsive. This required something colder, more calculated. A new, chilling clarity settled over him. His mind, usually occupied with pharmaceutical compounds and market projections, now worked with a ruthless efficiency. He pulled out his phone, the screen's glow stark in the dim room. He meticulously documented the scene, capturing multiple angles. Camilla's arm draped over Franklin, their intertwined legs, the man's sleeping face, the clothes on the chair. Each click of the shutter felt like a hammer blow driving a nail into the coffin of his marriage. Pictures secured, he moved towards the chair. His movements were fluid, precise. He gathered every item of clothing, the shirt, the slacks, the underwear, the socks. He picked up the shoes. As he held the trousers, a dark, venomous idea sparked in the recesses of his mind, born of the cold fury consuming him. He remembered the small industrial-grade container of rodenticide powder they kept locked away in the garage for occasional pest control issues at their old warehouse. Potent, fast-acting. He'd brought some home ages ago and forgotten about it. Holding the bundle, he crept back out of the bedroom, pulling the door almost shut behind him. Downstairs, in the garage, illuminated only by the eerie green glow of the security panel, he located the small, plainly marked canister on a high shelf. Unscrewing the cap, the acrid chemical scent hit his nostrils. With deliberate care, he inverted Franklin's trousers and sprinkled a generous amount of the fine, grayish powder deep inside the inner seam area, rubbing it lightly into the fabric lining. He imagined the itching, the burning, the insidious spread of the poison against skin. It was a vicious, disproportionate act, fueled by a blinding need to inflict pain, to defile the man who had defiled his home. He carefully placed the contaminated trousers back with the rest of the clothes. He took Franklin's wallet from the trouser pocket, extracting the driver's license, Franklin Thompson, a Charlotte address, and a wad of cash. He pocketed the cash, a petty act of spite, and tossed the wallet onto the bundle of clothes. He grabbed his own briefcase and duffel bag from where he dropped them near the door. Outside, the gold Mercedes gleamed under the moonlight. He used the key fob he'd found in the trousers to unlock it. He tossed Franklin's clothes, wallet included, onto the passenger floor mat. He slid into the driver's seat, the scent of expensive leather and Franklin's cloying cologne assaulting his senses. He hated fancy cars, always found them pretentious, but as the engine purred to life with a low growl, a surge of unfamiliar power coursed through him. He gripped the wheel, the smooth leather cool beneath his fingers. This car, this symbol of Franklin's intrusion, would become an instrument of his rage. He navigated the silent suburban streets, the powerful engine barely whispering. He drove for nearly an hour, heading west, away from the city, towards the dense woods bordering the old quarry lake. The farther he drove, the calmer he became, the cold resolve solidifying. He found a deserted access road, overgrown and barely navigable, that led down a steep embankment toward the water's edge. The lake lay still and black under the moonless sky, a perfect abyss. He stopped the car, meters from the drop-off, the headlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating the skeletal branches of bare trees. He got out, leaving the engine running, the driver's door ajar. He walked to the front of the Mercedes, placing his hands flat on the hood. He took a deep, steadying breath, the damp, earthy smell of the woods filling his lungs. Then, with a surge of calculated force, he pushed. The heavy car resisted for a moment, then lurched forward. He shifted his weight, shoving harder. The tires spun on the loose gravel, catching, and the Mercedes rolled towards the edge. Max stepped back, watching dispassionately. The car tipped, its front end dipping sharply, and then it plunged downwards with a sickening crunch of metal and snapping undergrowth. It hit the water with a surprisingly muted splash, sending ripples across the black surface. The headlights remained on for a few eerie seconds, casting distorted beams up from beneath the water, before flickering out. The car settled, gurgling, air bubbles rising to the surface, and then it was gone, swallowed by the dark, silent depths. Forever. Max stood there for a long moment, the only sound the chirping of crickets and the distant hum of the highway. There was no satisfaction, only a vast, chilling emptiness. He had destroyed the evidence, erased the symbol, but the wound remained, raw and deep. He turned and began the long walk back towards the main road, a man adrift, propelled only by the lingering chill of his own vengeance. The pre-dawn chill seeped into Max's bones as he walked along the shoulder of the deserted county road. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, painting the horizon in bruised shades of purple and gray. After nearly an hour, the distant rumble of an approaching engine grew louder. Headlights appeared, cutting through the gloom. Max stepped closer to the asphalt, raising his hand, adopting the posture of a weary traveler, not a man who had just committed grand theft auto and disposed of the evidence in a lake. A beat-up pickup truck, rattling and sputtering, slowed down. The driver, a grizzled man in overalls with eyes narrowed in suspicion, leaned across the passenger seat. "Trouble?" his voice rasped. "Car trouble back there," Max lied smoothly, gesturing vaguely behind him. Engine died. "Cell's got no service out here. Heading towards Charlotte." The man scrutinized him for a long moment, taking in Max's rumpled suit from the day before, incongruous in this rural setting. "Bit fancy for these parts," he grunted, but seemed to decide Max wasn't an immediate threat. "Hop in, going as far as the junction." Max murmured his thanks, tossing his briefcase and duffel onto the floor and sliding onto the cracked vinyl seat. The cab smelled of stale cigarette smoke and motor oil. They drove in silence, the rising sun casting long shadows across the fields. At the highway junction, Max thanked the driver again and got out, watching the pickup rattle away. He was still miles from anywhere useful, but civilization felt closer. He pulled out his phone. Service bars appeared. He checked the address on Franklin Thompson's license again, then called a ride-sharing service. 20 minutes later, a nondescript sedan pulled up. Max gave the driver Franklin's address. As they drove towards the upscale Charlotte suburb, Max felt a grim sense of purpose solidify. He wasn't done yet. Franklin's humiliation wouldn't be complete until his carefully constructed life imploded. He arrived at the Thompson residence shortly after 7 a.m. It was a large, pristine colonial, the lawn perfectly manicured. A small pink bicycle lay abandoned near the garage, a stark symbol of the domesticity Max was about to shatter. He walked up the brick pathway, Franklin's driver's license held casually in his hand. He rang the doorbell. After a moment, the door opened a crack, revealing a young woman with tired eyes and hair hastily pulled back. She looked to be in her late 30s, attractive but clearly frazzled by the early morning rush. Max recognized her vaguely as Franklin's wife, Molly. Before she could speak, Max held up the license so she could see the picture and name, then gestured towards the empty space in the driveway where the gold Mercedes should have been. "I believe your husband left his car." Molly's eyes widened in confusion, then narrowed in sudden fear. She slammed the door shut. Max heard frantic scrabbling sounds from inside, then the door opened again, wider this time. Molly stood there, pale but resolute, holding her cell phone aloft. "I have emergency dialed," she said, her voice trembling slightly but firm. "One press and they send someone. You tell me my husband is okay right now, or I swear." Max met her gaze steadily, his expression carefully neutral, projecting concern, not menace. "Ma'am, your husband is physically fine, as far as I know. But I have photographs on my phone. Taken less than 6 hours ago, of your husband, without clothes, asleep in my bed with my wife." He paused, letting the words sink in. "He left his car, his clothes, his wallet at my house. I'm just trying to figure out what to do next." "If you want to call emergency, please do. I'll wait right here." Molly stared at him, her face crumpling as the horrific implications dawned. The fight seemed to drain out of her. From deeper inside the house, a child's voice called out, "Mommy, is breakfast ready?" Molly flinched. "Wait here," she whispered, her voice choked. She turned and hurried back towards the kitchen. Max heard muffled voices, her soothing tones, the high-pitched chatter of children. She returned a few minutes later, looking utterly defeated. I have to get the kids to school," she said numbly. "He told me he was in Atlanta overnight. A business trip." She gestured vaguely towards the living room. "You can wait inside." "I trust you more than him right now, God help me." She handed him a mug. "Coffee, black, it's all I've got made." Max stepped inside. The house smelled of toast and laundry detergent. He sat stiffly on an antique sofa as Molly marshaled 2 young children, a boy and a girl, through the hallway, backpacks bouncing. She introduced Max curtly as a friend of Daddy's having car trouble and ushered them out the front door. Max sat alone in the perfect, silent house, sipping the lukewarm coffee. It tasted bitter. He considered calling his lawyer, his secretary, but decided against it. He just sat, letting the quiet press in, the reality of his shattered life settling heavily upon him. Molly returned about 40 minutes later. She'd clearly made an effort, hair combed, a touch of lipstick, but her eyes were red-rimmed and haunted. She sank into the armchair opposite him. "I'm Molly Thompson," she said formally, extending a hand. Her grip was cool, trembling slightly. "Currently married to Franklin Thompson, who is apparently currently sleeping with the woman you are currently married to." A humorless bark of laughter escaped Max. Max Tronder. And yes, that sums it up. "My wife's name is Camilla." He briefly recounted the events of the night, the arrival, the discovery, omitting the detail about the poison and the lake, simply stating he'd taken the car and clothes. As he spoke, silent tears tracked down Molly's cheeks. "I'm divorcing him," Molly whispered, her voice raw. "I knew something was wrong. The late nights, the business trips, I just didn't want to believe it." She looked at Max, a flicker of desperate hope in her eyes. "Those pictures, do you still have them? I might need them." Max nodded slowly. "I do. But Molly," he leaned forward slightly, adopting a tone of shared pain. "Think carefully. Seeing them, it burns the image into your head. It makes forgiveness, if that's ever a possibility for you, infinitely harder." I decided not to look at them again myself. He saw the conflict in her eyes. "Tell you what, I won't send them unless you ask. If you need them for the divorce, call my lawyer. I'll give you his details." He can handle it discreetly. Molly seemed to deflate with relief. Thank you, that's considerate. She wiped her eyes. So, what now? Are you giving the car back? Are you going to wait here and beat him up when he eventually slinks home? A cold smile touched Max's lips. Actually, Molly, the car, it seems to be registered in your name. Franklin mentioned something about tax reasons when I looked through his wallets. Molly blinked. Then a slow, dangerous light dawned in her eyes. He did do that. Said it was better for depreciation. She trailed off, thinking. So, technically, I own the car. Technically, Max agreed smoothly. A plan began to form, visible on Molly's face as her expression shifted from victim to strategist. You know, she said, her voice gaining strength, there have been a lot of break-ins around here lately. We have a security system, very loud, direct line to the police. She looked at Max, a glint of grim satisfaction in her eyes. And we keep a spare key hidden under a rock in the backyard. If that key were to go missing, and Franklin comes home expecting to get in. Max leaned back, allowing himself a small, predatory smile. He saw exactly where this was going. He might get desperate, especially dressed in... He paused, remembering the ridiculous outfit Camilla would likely provide. Whatever my wife can find for him. And if the alarm was set to instant alert, Molly continued, the pieces clicking into place. And the police were perhaps alerted to suspicious activity in the neighborhood earlier today. He could find himself in a rather embarrassing situation, Max finished. Molly Thompson, you are a remarkable woman. Just a woman fed up with being lied to, she corrected, though a faint flush colored her cheeks. You should go. Keep the car for now. I'll misplace the key and set the alarm. He usually gets back from his trips around lunchtime. I think I'll take the kids to the park this afternoon. Give him plenty of time. Call me when you want the car back, or if there are developments, Max said, standing up. He gave her the contact information for Anna Reinhardt, the divorce lawyer Fred had recommended. As Max drove away in the gold Mercedes, leaving Molly to set the trap, he felt a sliver of dark satisfaction. Franklin Thompson was about to have a very, very bad day, and Max had helped make it happen. Franklin Thompson felt like warmed-over garbage. The cheap motel mattress had done nothing for his back, and the lingering guilt mixed unpleasantly with the remnants of last night's wine. Camilla had been distant, tense, practically shoving him out of her car when she dropped him off near his house around noon. She'd managed to find him some of Max's old, ridiculously ill-fitting clothes, faded sweatpants cinched tight with a piece of rope, and a stretched-out sweatshirt that smelled faintly of mothballs. He looked like a homeless clown. He trudged up his own pristine brick pathway, feeling exposed and ridiculous. He prayed Molly was home, that he could somehow smooth things over, concoct a plausible lie. But the house had a closed-off, silent air. He tried the front door, locked. Of course. Heart sinking, Franklin hurried around the back, heading for the decorative landscaping rock near the patio where they kept the spare key. He scrabbled underneath it, empty. The rough stone scraped his knuckles. Crap, he muttered, panic starting to bubble in his chest. He peered through the back windows. The house was dark, curtains drawn. He tried the back door, rattling the handle uselessly. Locked tight, he was locked out of his own home, dressed like a buffoon, with no car, no wallet, and a wife who probably knew everything by now thanks to that bastard Tronder. He imagined Max showing her the pictures, gloating. Fury warred with desperation. He had to get inside, get changed, call his dealership, figure out how to salvage this mess. His eyes landed on the large window of the family room. It seemed like the easiest point of entry. He scanned the backyard for something to break it with. A thick, dead branch lay near the oak tree. Perfect. He picked it up, weighing it in his hand. He glanced around nervously. No neighbors in sight. He needed to be quick. Remembering he was barefoot inside flimsy motel slippers, he dragged two heavy wrought iron patio chairs over to the window, positioning them strategically. He could smash the glass, then carefully climb over the chairs, minimizing contact with the shards. He took a deep breath, hefted the branch, and swung hard. The window exploded inwards with a satisfyingly loud crash. But the satisfaction was immediately drowned out by a deafening, high-pitched wail. The house alarm. Piercing, relentless. Crap! 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 Franklin scrambled onto the first chair, then the second, trying to hoist his large frame through the jagged opening. He felt glass slice into his shin, warm blood trickling down his leg. He had to get to the keypad in the hallway. Shut the thing off before... Freeze! Police! Hands where I can see them! Franklin froze mid-climb, one leg inside the house, the other dangling precariously. He twisted his head. Two uniformed officers stood at the edge of his patio, tools drawn, aimed squarely at him. "Drop the branch, get down, slowly," the taller officer commanded, his voice hard as steel. Franklin let the branch clatter to the patio stones. He tried to back out carefully, but his foot slipped on the chair. He tumbled backwards, landing hard on the flagstones with a painful grunt, shards of glass digging into his palms. "Officers, wait! This is my house!" Franklin gasped, trying to sit up, holding his bleeding hands. "I live here! I lost my key!" The officers advanced cautiously, tools still trained on him. "Stay down! Put your hands behind your back!" "But I'm telling you!" Franklin protested, trying to push himself up. In a swift, brutal movement, the taller officer lunged forward, shoving Franklin face first onto the cold flagstones. A knee pressed hard into his back, grinding his cheek against the rough surface. Pain shot through his shoulder as his arms were wrenched behind him. "I said stay down!" the officer snarled, the smell of stale coffee and aggression close to Franklin's face. Metal clicked tightly around his wrists, biting into the skin. "You have the right to remain silent!" The officer began rattling off the Miranda warning as Franklin struggled futilely against the weight pinning him down. "Listen to me. Call my wife, Molly Thompson. She can tell you." "I locked myself out!" Franklin pleaded, his voice muffled against the stone. The officer yanked him roughly to his feet. Franklin staggered, his face scraped and bleeding, dignity shredded along with his ridiculous clothes. He looked wildly at the officers, trying to make them understand. "My car was stolen. My wallet. That's why I—" The second officer, younger, with a look of profound disgust on his face, stepped close. "Shut your mouth, scumbag." And then, with calculated contempt, the officer spat, a gob of saliva landing wetly on Franklin's cheek. Humiliation burned hotter than the pain. Franklin recoiled instinctively, a strangled noise of outrage escaping him. This only seemed to amuse the officers. The taller one shoved him forward towards the street where a patrol car waited, its lights flashing, drawing the attention of curtain-twitching neighbors. But my wife," Franklin stammered, desperation clawing at him. "Yeah, we talked to a Molly Thompson," the taller cop said with heavy sarcasm as he opened the back door of the cruiser. "Said her husband's out of town. Said anyone trying to break in her house is a burglar and she hopes we lock him up and throw away the key." He shoved Franklin unceremoniously into the back seat. "Looks like your luck just ran out, pal." As the patrol car pulled away, leaving behind the shattered window and the staring neighbors, Franklin Thompson finally understood. Max Tronder hadn't just taken his clothes and his car. He had orchestrated his complete and utter ruin. The acrid smell of the police car, the throbbing pain, the sting of spit on his cheek. It was nothing compared to the cold dread pooling in his stomach. His life, as he knew it, was over. The months following the implosion were a blur of legal proceedings and quiet, simmering resentment for Max. Anna Reinhardt, his divorce lawyer, proved ruthlessly efficient. Armed with the photographic evidence of infidelity and Max's cold determination, she hammered out a settlement heavily favoring him. The pharmaceutical company sale had finalized, netting Max millions. Since the company predated the marriage, those funds were legally his separate property, untouchable by Camila. Their marital home, tainted by the betrayal, was sold quickly. Max ensured the equity split reflected Camilla's diminished position. She walked away with significantly less than half, barely enough for a down payment on a small condo in a less desirable part of Charlotte. Alimony was minimal and short-term, justified by Camilla's ability to work as a paralegal and Max's need to preserve his now separate assets. He covered the girl's remaining Duke tuition, framing it as his unwavering paternal duty, further isolating Camilla. Franklin Thompson's life spiraled downwards even faster. The breaking and entering charge was eventually reduced, but the resisting arrest charge stuck. Combined with the public humiliation, his affair becoming dealership gossip and Molly's swift, merciless divorce filing, aided pro bono by her own brother, a lawyer disgusted by Franklin's behavior, his reputation was shredded. Fired from the Mercedes dealership, he struggled to find comparable work. Molly got the house, primary custody, and substantial child support. Franklin ended up in a cramped apartment, his flashy lifestyle replaced by mounting debt and crippling regret. The lingering, inexplicable rash from the poisoned trousers served as a constant, agonizing reminder of his folly. Camilla, adrift and ostracized by many former friends, clung to her paralegal job. She saw her daughters sporadically, the interactions strained. The girls, loyal to Max, who painted himself as the stoic victim, treated her with a pained politeness that cut deeper than anger. Almost a year after the discovery, Max decided it was time for another final revelation. He arranged dinner with Jane and Joan at an upscale restaurant in Charlotte during their fall break. He was casually dressed but radiated a new, hard-edged confidence. He'd spent the past year meticulously rebuilding his life, focusing on fitness, traveling, and ensuring his financial dominance. They made small talk through appetizers, the girls recounting college anecdotes, Max listening with detached interest. Then, as the main courses arrived, Max leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Girls," he began, his voice calm, almost conversational. "There's something else you need to know. Something I found out recently. It concerns your mother, and me." "And you?" Jane and Joan exchanged uneasy glances. "Dad? What is it?" Joan asked nervously. Max took a sip of his wine. "After the initial events, I had some routine medical tests done. And as part of that, purely by chance, some genetic markers came up. Things didn't quite align." He paused, letting the implication hang in the air. "So I pursued it. I had a private DNA test done, using samples I still had from your childhood, hair from your old hairbrushes, things like that." He looked directly at them, his eyes devoid of warmth. "The results were conclusive. There's zero probability that I am your biological father." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant clatter of cutlery from other tables. Jane's fork slipped from her fingers, hitting the plate with a sharp ping. Joan's face went deathly pale, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. What are you saying?" Jane finally whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm saying," Max stated, his tone flat, factual, "that your mother was unfaithful not just recently, but long before Franklin Thompson. Years before. Likely around the time you were conceived." He didn't offer comfort, didn't soften the blow. He delivered the information like a final, irrefutable judgment. Tears welled in Joan's eyes, spilling silently down her cheeks. Jane stared at Max, shock warring with dawning horror and a terrible, unwanted understanding of her mother's past actions. The foundation of their identity, their family history, fractured in an instant. "Who?" Joan choked out. "Do you know who?" Max shook his head, a dismissive gesture. "No, and frankly, I have no interest in finding out. It doesn't change anything for me now. My relationship with you both remains unchanged in my eyes. I raised you. I consider you my daughters." He presented this as magnanimity, but the underlying message was clear. He was the constant, the reliable one, while their mother's betrayal ran deeper than they could have imagined. "But I felt you had the right to know the truth about your biological origins and about the extent of your mother's deceit." He watched them cry, his expression unchanging. He had delivered the final blow, cementing Camilla's isolation, ensuring his daughters, wounded and confused, would likely cling even tighter to him, the man they now knew had raised them despite not being their biological father. It was a cruel, calculated move, perfectly executed. The villain's checkmate. 1 year later, the grand ballroom of the Charlotte Plaza Hotel glittered under crystal chandeliers. White roses overflowed from tall vases, casting a fragrant scent over the elegantly dressed guests celebrating Jane's wedding. Max stood near the orchestra, looking impeccable in a tailored tuxedo. He radiated health and success, tanned from a recent sailing trip in the Mediterranean. On his arm was Isabella, a strikingly beautiful woman in her late 40s, with laughing eyes and an equally athletic build. A neurosurgeon he'd met climbing Kilimanjaro. They looked like a power couple, perfectly matched, drawing admiring glances. Joan, the maid of honor, stood nearby with her fiancé, chatting easily with her father and Isabella. Across the crowded room near a secondary entrance, Camilla hesitated. She looked diminished, thinner, lines of stress etched around her eyes and mouth. Her dress nice, but clearly off the rack, a stark contrast to the designer gown swirling around her. Beside her stood Carl, a portly, balding lawyer from her firm, his expression kind but slightly uncomfortable. Camilla clutched her small handbag, her knuckles white. Jane had invited her, a reluctant olive branch perhaps, but explicitly forbade her from bringing a +1 she didn't know. Yet, Camilla had brought Carl, a small act of defiance or perhaps desperation for support. She scanned the room, her eyes inevitably finding Max. Seeing him laughing, thriving, so effortlessly happy with another woman, sent a fresh wave of bitterness and grief through her. He hadn't aged. He looked revitalized, while she felt worn down, hollowed out by the past 2 years. The DNA revelation had been the final, devastating blow, explaining so much yet deepening the chasm between her and her daughters, between her and the life she'd irrevocably lost. Taking a shaky breath, Camilla plastered on a brittle smile and started towards the main reception area, Carl trailing uncertainly behind her. She exchanged brief, strained greetings with a few familiar faces, the polite smiles barely concealing the judgment in their eyes. Her target was Max. She didn't know what she needed. An acknowledgement? An argument? Just to disrupt the perfect picture he presented? As she approached, Max saw her coming. His smile tightened fractionally, his eyes turning cold. Isabella glanced from Max to Camilla, sensing the sudden tension. "Max," Camilla said, her voice louder than intended, cutting through the music and laughter. Several nearby guests turned to look. Max inclined his head slightly, his expression carefully neutral. "Camilla." "Carl!" He offered a curt nod to her companion. "Jane looks beautiful, doesn't she?" "Don't you patronize me, Max?" Camilla snapped, her control finally shattering. The carefully constructed composure dissolved, replaced by raw, ugly resentment. "Standing there like the lord of the manor, you think you're so perfect, don't you? You ruined my life!" "Camilla," Max said, his voice dangerously low, "this is neither the time nor the place." "Oh, isn't it?" she shot back, her voice rising, attracting more attention. Joan hurried over, her face pale with alarm. "You poisoned them against me, told them lies, made yourself out to be the poor victim." "Mom, please!" Joan begged, trying to pull her gently away. "Don't do this, not here, not today." Camilla shook off her daughter's hand. "He took everything. My home, my friends, my daughters." Her eyes blazed with a mixture of fury and tears. "You think that DNA crap gives you the right?" "You think that makes up for how you calculated every move to destroy me?" "The only person who destroyed you, Camilla, was yourself," Max retorted, his voice like ice chips. "Your choices, your lies. Spanning decades." Fueled by rage and perhaps too much pre-reception champagne, Camilla lunged at him, her hand raised, aiming to slap his smug face. "You bastard!" Max reacted instantly, catching her wrist in a grip like steel before her hand could connect. He held her there, his eyes boring into hers. "I don't make an even bigger fool of yourself than you already have." Carl, flustered and clearly out of his depth, stepped forward awkwardly. "Here now, Max. Let her go. There's no need for—" Before Carl could finish, Max released Camilla with a slight shove that sent her stumbling back against a floral arrangement. He then turned his cold fury on Carl. "Stay out of this, ambulance chaser. This is family business you stumbled into." "Now see here!" Carl puffed himself up, trying to assert himself. "You can't treat her like—" It happened fast. Max didn't hesitate. He delivered a short, vicious slap across Carl's face. The sound cracked through the sudden hush that had fallen over the nearby guests. Carl staggered back, stunned, his hand flying to his cheek, a red mark blooming instantly. "I warned you," Max said, his voice lethally calm. Before Carl could react further, Max grabbed the front of his ill-fitting tuxedo jacket, spun him around, and shoved him hard towards the floor. Carl tripped over his own feet, sprawling onto the plush carpet with an undignified yelp. Max took a step towards him, planting a foot firmly in the center of his back, pinning him face down. It was a chilling echo of Franklin's humiliation, a demonstration of absolute dominance. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Jane burst into tears. Joan stood frozen, horrified. Max looked down at the sputtering lawyer, then scanned the shocked faces around him, his expression utterly remorseless. He pulled out his phone, not dialing emergency, but the venue's internal security number he'd programmed earlier, just in case. "Security to the main ballroom," he said coolly into the phone. "We have 2 disruptive individuals who need to be removed immediately." He disconnected, stepping back from Carl, who was slowly, painfully pushing himself up, his face flushed with shame and fury. Camilla stood rigid, trembling, tears streaming down her face, utterly broken. Within moments, 2 burly security guards in black suits arrived, assessing the scene with practiced efficiency. Max gestured towards Camilla and the disheveled Carl. "These 2, escort them out. They're no longer welcome." The guards moved towards Camilla and Carl. Carl started to protest, but a firm hand on his arm and a low word from the guard silenced him. Camilla didn't resist. She seemed beyond fighting, beyond anything but numb despair. Head bowed, she allowed herself to be steered towards the exit, Carl stumbling miserably behind her. The ballroom doors swung shut behind them, leaving a stunned silence in their wake. Max calmly straightened his tuxedo jacket, adjusted his cufflinks, and turned back to Isabella and his daughters, his face a mask of controlled composure. The music started up again, hesitant at first, then regaining its rhythm. Guests averted their eyes, murmuring amongst themselves, pretending normality. Max met Isabella's troubled gaze and offered a tight, reassuring smile that didn't reach his eyes. He had won. Utterly, brutally, and publicly. The final act of his vengeance was complete, leaving nothing but wreckage in its path. He was the victor, standing tall amidst the ruins he himself had engineered. The story ended there, in the glittering ballroom, with the chilling finality of Max's cold, calculated triumph.